Welcome to Returning to the Body Mind with your host, Dr. Melissa West. As a yoga instructor and yoga therapist, Melissa facilitates a process of listening to the wisdom of your body for self-awareness, understanding, affirmation, and transformation. Returning to the Body Mind offers the opportunity to turn inward and through the intelligence of your body find the answers about yourself and your life. Now, here's your host, Dr. Melissa West.
Good morning and welcome to Contact Talk Radio. You're listening to Returning to the Body Mind on Wednesday, June the 9th. It's the day before my husband's birthday today. All week it's been really funny. All week he's been saying, it's my birthday week this week. It's my birthday week this week. And so when I read June 9th this morning, I'm thinking, yeah, that's the day before Tim's birthday. So happy birthday, Tim. So I am with you this morning. We're going to be talking with Zoe Newell. She is the author of a great little book called Downward Dogs and Warriors, Wisdom Tales for Modern Yogis. And Zoe Newell, she earned her Master's of Theological Studies from Harvard Divinity School in 1988 with a focus on religions of the world. She began her study of yoga at the age of 14 with neurosurgeon psychiatrist Ramutri S. Mishra, MD, at the Ananda Ashram in New York State. And in Nashville, she created the Yoga Education Society and co-founded the Southern Institute of Yoga Studies. She's certified at the 1,000-hour level and is an experienced yoga instructor and a member of the Yoga Alliance since 1999. So we're going to be talking to her about her book, Downward Dogs and Warriors. We'll be talking about the Indian gods and goddesses and how they affect our yoga practice and how they come into our yoga practice. So I'm looking forward to talking to her a little bit more about Hindu mythology and how it informs our yoga asana today. Zoe and I will be taking your calls today. If you'd like to speak with her, you can call in toll free at 1-877-230-3062. So this morning we'll continue our series of talks on the yamas and the niyamas. Last week we finished the yamas with a parigraha. That was the non-grasping or non-hoarding one, and we had a lot of fun with that in class last week. We did a little bit of confession time, and everybody admitted to what it was that they tend to hang on to and aren't too willing to part with. So that was a lot of fun, and that class is up on namasteyoga.blip.tv for you to do now. And now this week we're moving into the niyamas, and the niyamas are the internal controls or restraints. So the yamas have more to do with how we interact in the world, and the niyamas are the personal practices. They're the ways that we can take care of ourselves on a personal level. So really part of doing yoga is taking care of ourselves, and taking care of ourselves is part of practicing yoga. So when we start to move into the niyamas, we're looking at how we can take care of ourselves so that, we can be full and then we're able to move out into the world. Now, the first niyama is shaucha, and shaucha means cleanliness, and it's all about cleanliness on a lot of levels. When we do yoga, we practice asana, and asana helps us to keep our bodies and systems clean. We can do pranayama, which is breath practice, which is a clarifying and cleansing practice as well. We do meditation, which helps to clear our mind. And then, this shaucha can go to a lot of levels, so that we can also think about clearing our emotions, and that kind of thing too. So it has to do with the purification of all layers of our individual self. And the thing with shaucha, which is very much like yoga, asana, and also meditation, is that it requires ongoing care. It's not that you look after yourself once and then you're done. You have to continually look after yourself. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't just brush your teeth once and then your teeth are clean. You need ongoing yoga asana and meditation, and that really helps to keep yourself clean. So it has to do with ongoing care and personal hygiene. but also uncluttered surroundings. So it's not just keeping ourselves clean, but our surroundings clean. So keeping our home clean and uncluttered. And I've been thinking a lot about how aparigraha relates and just rolls into shaucha so nicely because, if we are practicing aparigraha, then we won't have a lot of extra things around. We'll only keep the things that we need and that we use, and then we'll get rid of the rest. And that already starts to create this really beautiful uncluttered surrounding for us to live peacefully in. Shaucha also has to do with the food that we consume. So, of course, traditionally, yogis did espouse a vegetarian diet, and I also think that that's the cleanest diet that you can eat as well, a vegan diet. So that's a great way to keep your body clean and also a great way to keep the earth clean because, if we look at our planet and all the resources it takes to raise me, it's just infinitely more than it takes to raise plants. So if we can keep our diet really clean and plant-based, that not only helps our bodies but also the larger body of the world itself. And a really interesting thing about shaucha is that we can talk about coming clean. Do you ever have something where, you've got this secret or you've got something that you're trying to keep secret from other people? And that actually takes a lot of energy. So if we can come clean on certain things, that is such a great release too. And also with that too, having emotional releases, so laughter and crying can be very cleansing for the body too. So the body, this niyama reminds us of the impermanence of the body too, that we're only in this body for a short time in this life, and that because the body is always changing, shaucha reminds us that because we always have to take care of our body and clean it, that it reminds us that the body itself is impermanent. And when we come to that realization, we realize that it's actually the light within that's unchanging and needs no maintenance. So I'm about ready to bring my guest on. I'm not sure she's available yet. If not, I can keep talking for a little bit. So let me just say a few things about, she's here. Okay. So we'll bring Zoe on then. That's all right. So if you want to go to namasteyoga.blip.tv this week, we'll be recording the class on Friday, and we'll do lots of, the class that I've got already started planning is designed to really work with the seven channels of elimination: the liver, the lungs, the lymphatic system, the blood, the colon, the kidneys, to really help to remove impurities from the body through asana and pranayama. So we'll be recording that on Friday, and that will be up for you early next week. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to Zoe Newell so we can get talking and storytelling. So welcome, Zoe.
Hello. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here, too. I didn't want to talk about this all by myself. I'm glad to have the expert with me.
Oh, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I love it.
I think so. Well, I heard you're working on your PhD right now.
Yes.
How's that going?
Oh, it's going well. Thanks. I'm writing.
Good for you.
So I'm at the fun part. Yeah. And actually, in the doctorate, I'm looking at the ways that images, similar to the ones in my book, these kind of poster images, and the stories behind them contributed to the formation of a modern Hindu identity at the end of the colonial period. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Godspeed, my friend, because I've been there. I know what it's like. It's a long haul.
Thank you.
So I'm rooting for you. Feels like it's never going to end when you're in it, doesn't it?
It kind of does, but I do see a light now. Yeah.
Good for you. So, your book, Downward Dogs and Warriors, is quite different from other yoga books, and you really look at the Hindu mythology behind the yoga postures that inform the yoga postures. So why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I tell a story in the introduction about how the book was born, which was that I was in a teacher training with Judith Lassiter up in Canada a number of years ago, and we were talking about how asana can be a mirror for your emotional and mental state. Mm-hmm. Someone told a story about being in a class where the person on the next mat seemed to be in a real rage. And it kind of scared her, the energy that was coming off this guy. And the context of this discussion was, well, did the teacher respond or how did they normalize it? But later on, I said, well, what pose were you doing? And she said, Warrior 2, Virabhadrasana 2. And I thought, oh, well, of course. So right. So I said, oh, well, you know the story of that, don't you? And almost no one did. Mm-hmm. So I told the story, and they all went, wow. And then later on, people said, can you recommend a book that relates the poses to the stories? And we all thought about it for a minute and realized that there really was not such a book.
No.
And I said, I'm going to write one. And, Judith and everyone said, yes, do. And so she particularly was very supportive. And I did. And Himalayan Institute published it, for which I'm deeply grateful. Mm-hmm. And it's been really well received. I get emails from people saying, boy, this really touched me, or this really somehow has deepened my practice, and that makes me very happy. It also won an award for silver medal as best book from the Nautilus, whatever it is, Foundation, and that makes me happy too. But really, I had most hoped that this would touch individuals and that teachers would like it and use it in their classes, and that's happening.
Absolutely. The way I came across your book is that I decided that, I went to a class where she did a class on, I'm trying to think what it was now. It was some myth, which I can't even remember now. Oh, it was a Ganesha class. And I got so intrigued. And so this idea really pulled me, and I decided to come home and create this whole series of classes around the Hindu deities.
Yeah.
And same kind of thing. I was like, okay, so where do I go for information? And that's how I learned about your book. Ah. Yeah. Ah. So why don't you tell our listeners how your book is different from other yoga books then?
Well, for one thing, asana is not the primary focus. I organized this book around myths and symbols related to Shiva, partly because there are a lot of them, so it was relatively easy to find good ones and poses that would probably be familiar to a lot of people. But also because Shiva is the original yogi mythologically. Right. So everything in this book has something to do with Shiva and his wife Parvati, who's the first yoga student. So there's that focus. But it's also different because I include suggestions for reflection and suggestions for journaling. So while there are instructions on how to go into each pose and a little bit about how to adapt it, for some conditions, it's not a turn the right foot in, turn the left foot out kind of book. Right. There are a lot of books that do that really well. Yeah. And I wasn't trying to do another one. I can't compete with some of the people out there on that. It was just more intended to remind people who are familiar with these poses, here's how you go. And in my mind, my approach really does relate to the niyamas, particularly Swadhyaya. which is self-examination.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, I'm curious about how you teach yoga as well, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious, as somebody who would love to do this, but sort of feels somewhat timid about it just because I've never done it or been in a class where it's done, is how you bring journaling into the class context.
I don't generally bring it into the context of an hour and 15-minute or hour and a half class.
Mm-hmm.
But I will do kind of mini workshops or extended classes that are 2 or 3 hours. And one thing I think that's important is to get people comfortable with keeping their hands moving, so they don't think this is going to be. A lot of people are self-conscious about writing, and so the idea is to just write. And I'll give them 5 minutes, just write anything, do a sort of brain drain, kind of what's in your head, and let's get below it. Or how do you feel physically, mentally, spiritually? 5 minutes, now stop. Or 10 minutes. Okay, now let's do a short breathing practice, for example. Journal again. Now how do you feel?
Interesting.
Okay. Now let's take this pose. Now how do you feel? Journal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I love that.
Intersperse the asana or breathing practice with the reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I love that. Thanks for that advice.
You're welcome. It's great. And, after you've been doing this for a while, 30, 40 minutes, by then people are generally relaxed enough and into it enough that they're willing to share.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, so we're already at that place where we need to take a break in the program. When we come back, I want you to let's talk a little bit about the value in stories in the context of yoga.
Okay.
I'm Melissa West, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and host of Returning to the Body Mind. Today we're talking to my guest, Zoe Newell. She is the author of Downward Dogs and Warriors. To find out more about yoga with me or more about Zoe Newell, check out my website, www.melissawest.com. Stay with us, and we'll be right back.
For over 25 years, Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy has been creating yoga therapists who have supported thousands in inner healing. Now, Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy offers teacher training. Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy offers a therapeutic approach to teaching with a body-mind focus. You'll become the kind of teacher who enables and empowers their students to use their yoga practice to change their lives, overcome stress, heal from the inside, heal relationships, and discover their unique magnificence. For more information on yoga teacher training with Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy, visit www.pryt.com. That's www.pryt.com. And look for Yoga Teacher Training under the Training Programs drop-down menu. Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy offers yoga teacher training with a whole new twist. This is a Yoga Alliance approved 200-hour certification course.
ContactTalkRadio.com.
Want to practice yoga with Melissa in your very own home? Visit melissawest.com and click on DVD link to find great yoga and Pilates videos for use in your DVD player. From chakra balancing to awesome abs, boost your immunity, or take a yoga detox. Release pain in your upper back, neck, and shoulders, or decenter your depression. There is something for everybody. Check out melissawest.com. That's melissawest.com and pick up your yoga DVD today.
Listening to Returning to the Body Mind with your host, Dr. Melissa West. To talk to Melissa during the show, call toll-free 1-877-230-3062.
Welcome back. You're listening to Returning to the Body Mind, and I'm your host, Melissa West. We're talking to my guest, Newell, today, and we're talking about downward dogs and warriors. But just before we go back to that discussion, we usually talk a little bit about things that are coming up right now. So I just wanted to let you know that I have posted my summer yoga classes. We're going to do just kind of like actually a little extension of our classes because we've been working on this series of classes on the yamas and the niyamas. And so we're just going to continue them into the summer for a few weeks. And then in August, I'm going to do a series of 3 classes around the Ayurvedic doshas. So we'll look at, I'll get you actually to do quizzes before you come, and we'll look at Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and we'll look at balancing each one of those doshas. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun, kind of fun way to spend our summer. Also, to let you know, this Sunday, June the 13th, our meditation group meets from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. So if you live on the east end of Toronto, give me a call. You're welcome to come join us. Just email me at info@melissawest.com. And let's see, for our sponsors, Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy, what's going on for them. They are doing lots of training in the main training center in Bristol, Vermont right now through June. And then in July, they're going to be in my hometown in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And they'll also be back at the training center, and I'm going to be going down for this. They're going to be doing some yoga teacher training that I'm going to go down and take part in July, from July 20th to 28th. So I'd love to see you there. They've got a really unique approach to teaching yoga that I'm excited to learn more about. And then in August, they'll be in Chicago, Illinois, and Seattle, Washington, where Contact Talk Radio airs out of. And they'll also be in Austin, Texas. So you can check them out. So just before the break, Newell and I were talking a little bit about how to incorporate journaling into a yoga class. And I said when we came back to the break, we would talk about how stories can enhance our yoga practice. So why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I think psychologically, storytelling can be tremendously powerful. So, it's important to say that not everyone may immediately relate to Hindu mythology. I mean, I got introduced to it so young that, it just sort of comes naturally and it works for me. But some people have other kinds of mythology that is not quite so directly related to yoga. And sometimes in working with emotional or psychological blocks, it can just help people to think about, well, was there a book I loved or a movie I loved or a TV show I really liked? And what was going on there? You know, who did I identify with? And what did they face? And how did they work that out? But the thing is, I think that the Hindu myths can very easily be understood as teaching stories like this. And in India, it's pretty standard for people to look to the mythology for role models. Yeah. So that's kind of how it relates. It's a deep cultural thing. It's part of the culture that yoga grows out of. And I think if we can understand that at least a little bit, you may not know all the details of all the stories, but just understand that there's a very rich context for all this. It's not just about physical health or getting, yoga abs or whatever. I think it makes it so much richer and just so much more satisfying in your practice.
Well, and I think the thing about the Hindu mythology is that it's so multi-leveled and layered. I mean, I think when you say that, it's not always for everybody, that it really does take an interpreter to just pull out some pieces of it to make it more relatable, because otherwise it can be confusing to the Western mind.
Yes. Yeah, it's vast and it's complicated. Yeah.
It is. And everybody's married to everybody, and there's several incarnations of a God, and so it just takes a lot to kind of tease out a little aspect of it.
Right. Yeah, so when you were saying I was an authority, I said, oh, hardly. Because, I mean, I don't know who it is. But, yeah, nobody's got all that in their head.
Yeah, I think, and in the context of teaching a yoga class, I think if you bring in like a whole story, it's just too much. You have to just tease out a little part of it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that works best. So why don't we do that? Why don't we look at, since your book is centered around Shiva, who is Shiva?
Well, Shiva is mythologically, he is the first yogi. He's the archetype. He's shown in a lot of different aspects, but one of the best known is this figure sitting cross-legged in the Himalayas, lost in deep meditation. Although lost might not quite be the word, because actually the stillness and solidity of his meditation is one of the things that keeps the whole world going.
Right.
Yeah. But there are a lot of stories that involve him not just as a meditator, but as active in the world and as engaged with his wife, Parvati, who is the first yoga student. And so some of the stories involve the two of them, say, flying around the universe or looking down, and Parvati becoming, in one story, Parvati sort of looks around and says, gosh, people are just so unhappy. Shouldn't you teach them yoga so that they'll have something to help them out of their suffering? Mm-hmm. And Shiva, this one isn't in my book. I don't know why. It's not. And Shiva says, okay. So they sit on the seashore, and he begins to tell Parvati systematically what yoga is and how to practice. And fish, pardon?
Is that presented in the Radiance Sutras?
I don't know. It may be.
I think it may be. Okay, so sorry, go on. A fish?
I mean, I think it's probably in a number of places, yeah.
Right.
But a fish, the king of the fishes, actually swims up and overhears this. So he stays and listens, and he too learns yoga. And that's the story behind the pose we know as Matsyendrasana, king of the fishes pose. But yeah, so through Parvati's intercession, Shiva comes to teach yoga to human beings to help us relieve our suffering.
So interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of who he is, and
right.
Part of who he is. He's also often seen as the dancer. Mm-hmm. He is and you'll see these statues of someone standing on one foot, very active arms, surrounded by flames, sort of an aureole of flames. And this is Shiva, whose dance brings the creation into existence and takes it out. So it's sort of like whatever is going on at a subatomic level. This is going on in his dance. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand Shiva as the god of destruction, too.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, sort of. There's an idea. There are three main male deities as of now who are sort of recognized in the Hindu pantheon, and that's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma being the creator, but he's kind of remote. There are no temples to Brahma. Vishnu, he's the one who incarnates over and over again as Krishna and sustains the universe. And Shiva is the destroyer, but it's important to realize that in his destruction, he paves the way for new creation.
Right.
So he doesn't just, he's not someone who comes in and just trashes things. But Shiva, as you were talking about in the niyamas, that the cleansing and purifying and even downsizing action, that's Shiva too.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the way I think about the destruction of Shiva is a very positive destruction, so that, it's like he clears the way for new things to come in, for creation to start again.
Yeah. Yeah. He destroys our illusions and our bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
We need a lot of destruction in our lives, if you think of it that way.
It's true, right?
Yeah.
Well, what I loved in your book, and I actually used this in my yoga class a few weeks ago, was your discussion of the warrior poses, and I'd never heard it quite told so well. Do you want to tell us the story of Shiva as the warrior?
Okay. Let's see. Well, Shiva's first wife, and actually his first and second wife are the same person. They're just different incarnations. But anyway, Shiva married a woman called Sati, who actually undertook a yoga practice in order to get his attention. And her family were not happy when she gave up a privileged life as a princess to go off with this half-naked yogi who lived in the mountains. Her father was almost the personification of convention and form, and he held and ritual. And so her father, King Daksha, holds a huge sacrifice, a yagya. So it's a religious ritual, and he invites everybody. He invites all the rulers, and he invites all the deities, but he does not invite Shiva, who is the Lord of all. Mm-hmm. And this is a bad idea because he is the Lord of all, and ultimately the sacrifice comes to him.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like a slap in the face.
It's like a slap in the face, and it also kind of undermines the sacrifice itself, which I think Daksha maybe doesn't think through.
Right.
And, so Sati says, oh, well, we should go anyway. I mean, of course we're invited. And Shiva says, I'm not so sure. Your father knows where we live, and I'm not going to crash his party if I'm not welcome. Mm-hmm. And eventually Sati goes, takes some of her women friends, and when she gets there, this yagya is underway, but her father and his friends are speaking very disrespectfully of Shiva. Mm-hmm. And she is so distressed, both on a personal level, because they're bad-mouthing her husband, whom she adores, but also because she's smart enough to realize how spiritually unwise it is to be holding a religious ritual while basically disrespecting the Lord. And so she leaps into the fire. It's a fire sacrifice, or in some versions, she, by her yogic powers, sets herself on fire. And she becomes the sacrifice. And so she kind of saves the sacrifice by making it a valid one. But also, I think there's an aspect of her just not being able to, being just so embarrassed that she can't live with this. So she leaps into the fire and is burnt. When Shiva hears what's happened, he comes roaring down from the Himalayas, and in his despair, he tears his hair. He pulls hairs from his head and throws them to the ground. And one of these hairs becomes Virabhadra, who's this embodiment of warrior energy and righteous anger. And as Virabhadra, Shiva goes, the sacrifice is still going on, he goes in and kind of puts an end to it. And then he picks up Sati's burnt body and begins to dance with it in his arms. And he dances, holding her. He dances all over India, all over the continent. And he's in such despair that other things begin to die in the world, and life can't go on. So some of the Vishnu and some of the other, Vishnu actually is the god whose job it is to keep life going. Vishnu throws his weapon, his discus, and begins to cut off pieces of her body, which drop at various places around India. And those places are today places of pilgrimage. And finally, as her body begins to disintegrate, Shiva's able to let it go and accept her death. I found it a tremendously moving story. So you have this Virabhadra, the warrior, kind of segueing into the dancer, which I think is very cool.
I think that's really cool, too.
And she's reborn. It's okay.
Yeah. And I find, we need to go to another break, but I do find that with these stories that they're so romantic, too. They just grab right at your heart.
I know.
They tell about undying love, so.
Yeah.
There's sort of universal appeal, I think, to these stories that is just so great. So when we come back from the break, we're going to continue with these stories with my guest, Newell. She's the author of Downward Dogs and Warriors. Stay with us, and we will be right back.
Discover a powerful mind-body system that has helped thousands of people achieve inner peace and fulfillment. Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy uses yogic approaches to deepen presence and awareness to know ourselves more fully. Out of this knowing, we are more easily moved to embrace the opportunity for change, growth, and enhanced well-being. Through assisted yoga postures and non-directive dialogue, Phoenix Rising practitioners guide clients to experience the connection of their physical and emotional selves. You will learn how to recognize and release the body-stored memories, fears, and traumas that trap you in the past. You will discover how to embrace your daily joys and fears to live your life to the fullest and find your own true self. To find out more about their training programs or to find a practitioner near you, go to www.pryt.com, as in PhoenixRisingYogaTherapy.com.
ContactTalkRadio.com.
Have you heard the news? Now you can download Melissa's much-loved yoga classes each week. Visit www.melissawest.com to download and subscribe to Melissa's free weekly video podcast featuring her Hatha yoga classes. This yoga video podcast will allow you to integrate your physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual bodies through yoga with Dr. Melissa West's personalized yoga instruction. Download Melissa's yoga classes today for use on your iPod, computer, or TV. Today at melissawest.com.
Did you know that you can rate this show on iTunes? The show you're listening to right now. It's true. You can leave your thoughts about the show, the topic, the guest. You can even leave a suggestion. Then, before you leave, rate the show. The hosts love hearing from you, so next time you download this show from iTunes, leave your thoughts and rate the show for the host and for others.
You're listening to Returning to the Body Mind with your host, Dr. Melissa West. To talk to Melissa during the show, call toll-free 1-877-230-3062.
Welcome back. I'm here with my guest today, Zoe Newell, and we're talking about downward dogs and warriors. And I said that I wanted to make sure before we go today that we had a chance to talk about the significance of cows in Hindu culture. So take it away, Zoe.
Yeah. Well, as we were saying, yeah, you gotta love cows. They're so sweet. Cows are known for, their sweetness, their patience, their generosity, their maternal qualities, and they're just huge in Indian mythology. I mean, cows are compared with rivers, with the earth, with the universe itself. It kind of goes on and on. One pose that all yoga students encounter sooner or later and probably love or hate is cow's head pose, cow's face pose, where you have one elbow up and one elbow down, and it's a really great shoulder opener. And for some people, it's very challenging. And I think this is one place where the patience and the stability of a cow stands us in good stead. Being able to just kind of stay with it and be gentle with yourself as you hold your shoulders, and just as a cow has to stay still and be patient while it's milked, Cows.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And cows are connected with Shiva in that his mount, the animal associated with him, is a bull. And you'll see pictures of him and Parvati riding the bull, Nandi bull, sometimes with their children, or flying on Nandi's back around the universe. And many, if not all, Shiva temples have a statue outside of the bull lying down, and then if you get in the right position, you can look between his horns into the very interior of the temple. So there's so much to say about cows that I almost don't know what to say.
Well, I loved how you talked about cows being sort of representation of mother and representation of earth, too. That was interesting to me as well.
Yes. Yeah. And that goes back to the Vedas, to the very earliest texts and hymns that we have. And there are interesting representations of a cow which has deities in its body, and the sun will be one eye and the moon will be the other eye, and then you can see mountains and rivers and trees in the legs. So cows also have come to stand for the earth itself and its bounty and its patience and its the maternal qualities of the earth that have all these wonderful resources which it just gives to us unstintingly. But also, we would hope we treat the earth with the respect that is due our mother and such a gentle and generous creature. Yeah. So cow protection is really important.
You know, as soon as I start to delve into the world of the stories of the deities and the significance of the yoga asanas. I want to know more. And as you said before, there's such limited resources. So what do you recommend for people who want to start delving more deeply into Hindu mythologies and stories?
Well, there are translations available of the Puranas, Purana. Many of them published in India, and I don't have a particular, there's a lot of them, no particular author, but I would sort of look that up online. The Himalayan Institute publishes a lot of books on this tradition, not necessarily strictly mythology, but I'd refer people to HimalayanInstitute.org for their publications and their magazine, Yoga International, which does the kind of thing that I try to do, integrating image and culture and myth with asana. There are some in BKS Iyengar's books, Light on Yoga and the Tree of Yoga, and I think maybe a little bit in Light on Pranayama. He will refer from time to time to mythology, but it's in there with all the other stuff. So you kind of have to give it a close read. You can't just pick that out.
Right.
It is there, and I recommend them for that. And there's an author, an Indian author named, whose last name is Patanaik, Patanaik, and I cannot think of his first name, begins with an R, but he's pulled together a number of volumes on, say, mythology about the mother, mythology about Shiva, and so on. I'm sorry.
Wow, that's fabulous.
I'm sorry I don't have... Oh, wait, hang on just a second.
So just as I was going to look that up.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, Devdutt. It's not an R. It's D-E-V, Victor, D-U-T-T, Thomas. Last name is P for Paul, A-T-T, A-N for Nancy, A-I-K. And at least some of his books are published by Inner Traditions in Rochester, Vermont.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So lots of places to look further for this, because I know in my classes, actually, when I first brought the Hindu deities into class, I was really nervous about it because I thought, well, I'm going to lose a lot of students. We're living in a Western Christian culture, and, this might be a little bit unsettling for people to begin to think about the idea of multiple gods and things like that. But much to my surprise, people they ate it up. So
Yeah.
I think it has to do with, how you present it. And the way that I really presented it was to look at how these deities represent an aspect of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So if you're talking about Shiva, then how, Shiva as the warrior, how we're called to be warriors in our lives and to be advocates, especially as women. And, I don't know about your classes, but in my yoga classes, we're predominantly women still. Yeah. And I think women are like the biggest advocates on the face of the planet for many things, but especially for our children and the things that we need to advocate for them, So I think women can really relate to this idea of the spiritual warrior.
Yeah, absolutely.
Standing up for what's right. Yeah, definitely interesting. So we have a few more minutes. Is there another story you want to share with us before we say goodbye for today?
Let's see. I like the story of how the Ganges fell to earth. I love that one.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I like to tell it. I like to set my students up with their legs up the wall and then tell them this story, which is Once there was a king, although I usually say it was a princess, whose ancestors had basically gotten themselves into some serious trouble and were now in sort of a Hindu version of limbo. They couldn't reincarnate, and they were just kind of stuck. Long backstory to that. But so she, Bhagirathi, takes up yoga and takes up austerities, and as I sometimes say, joins several 12-step groups and gets into therapy to kind of clean up the family's bad karma. And she attracts the attention of heaven. People, the deities decide they want to help her. The best way to do that is to have Ganga, the mother river goddess, come to earth. And Ganga, in her heavenly aspect, is the Milky Way.
Now, so you know what? Unfortunately, we've run out of time.
Oh,
so
no.
you've set the story up so beautifully. So, you know what? I'm going to encourage people to pick up your book.
Read the book.
The end of
Find
it.
out how it ends.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how can people find out more about you and your book?
I have a website, which is Zonewell, ZONEWELL.com. I have some copies of the book here. People can get it through the website, pay with PayPal. If they want it, if they want me to inscribe it, I will happily do that. They can also find the book through the Himalayan Institute. HimalayanInstitute.org will take you to a link for the press. But those are the best ways. Go to
Fabulous.
my website. Yeah.
So thank you so much for being with us today. So it was fabulous to have you here.
Thank you so much for asking me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And, you know, if our listeners enjoyed today's show, then you'll definitely want to tune in. It's almost like part B on June the 23rd when I'll be interviewing Alana Kavaya. I don't know how to say her last name. Kavaya. Do you know her?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Oh, you don't? Oh,
No,
she's got a book out called Myths of the Asanas. Do you know about that book?
No, I read about it in the stuff you sent me, and I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah. Good
so for all the listeners, she's coming up on June the 23rd. So thanks so much for tuning in today. I encourage you to go to my website, melissawest.com, to find out more about yoga with me. And, you know, if you enjoyed this stuff on the Hindu mythology, then I did do a whole series of yoga classes on namasteyoga.blip.tv around the Hindu deities. We did Ganesha, we did Shiva, Shakti, Vishnu. We did a lot of classes on Kali because I was really into Kali at the time, so you can definitely check that out.
Great.
I will be back next week with Vasanta Molina. She's a returning guest. I've been, you know, so many people are so interested in raw eating right now, and finally the sort of gurus of the nutrition field put out a book on becoming raw. So if you have questions about that and what it's like to eat a raw or mainly raw vegan diet and how to safely adopt that so that it's nutritionally safe and adequate, but also nourishing the body, mind, and soul, then Vasanta Molina will come in here next week and take out all the sort of hype and myth, and she'll bring it right down to the science of nutrition. They're great at that. So I'm looking forward to that next week. Remember, you can listen to the archives of my show at www.melissawest.com, or you can sign up to have Returning to the Body Mind automatically downloaded onto your computer through iTunes. If you just go to melissawest.com and click on the radio link, you'll be able to do that. And thank you to the thousands of listeners who are already downloading my show. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa West, coming to you live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, as I do every Wednesday at 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you for listening today, and thanks again to Zoe Newell for joining us. Join us next Wednesday at 8 a.m. and bring a friend to Returning to the Body Mind. Stay tuned for Doug Parks and his show, Science for Life. May the rising sun bless your heart with joy, and may the setting sun bless your mind with peace. Namaste.
listening to Returning to the Body Mind with your host, Dr. Melissa West. To pick up a yoga video or to download a free weekly video podcast of Melissa's yoga classes, visit www.melissawest.com. That's www.melissawest.com.